only on machine service. And
It closed in 2019. Is that when the shop closed?
that's when Red Hen closed.
Oh my gosh. When did, before the pandemic or during or
Yes,
after?
before, because I think I saw you in New Orleans right after we closed Red Hen. So that's when we came and did our big event, the panel in
Yeah,
New
we
Orleans.
did. That's
Yeah, I know
right.
2019 is kind of a blur because that's like right pre-pandemic.
2019, right. So you went in 2019,
Yeah.
you came and did our event. We had an event at the law school. It was
Mhm.
super fun.
It
People loved
was.
it. You did a little class.
Yeah.
And then by the following year, we were all in lockdown. So you
Yeah.
came March of 2019,
Yeah.
like
2019 like
29.
spiraled for us because we were kind of figuring out where we belong as far as a shop. We had a temporary space in the town next door. And then I had someone I had known had become a dealer and asked if I would become a support shop. So we moved our shop across town to support him. And that was literally months before the pandemic. And all of our plans for our Sewing Doc Academy were definitely put on hold because
Right. And then during the pandemic, sewing machines, it was a crazy thing. So what happened to you? So you're going along, you're shutting the shop down, which is a lot of work. You're moving into another shop. You're like trying to figure everything out. You're now relying on this income for your family, which is very stressful, I would imagine, because with the shop, you had Paul's income, so you didn't need to take a salary necessarily, and you had health insurance and you got a kid and all that. So
yes.
all right, so you're moving along, everything's fine. And then March 2020 happens and everything shuts down and we all start making masks.
Yes.
So what happened to your business when all of this occurred?
Well, it had never occurred to us people were going to start making masks, first of all. And of course, nobody did. I mean,
nobody did. Yeah.
We're in Georgia, so we never actually, our governor never really shut everything down. Had we been shut down, though, we probably would have fallen under a necessity as far as offering a service. So we were at about a 2-week turnaround time, which is average for us. And then I remember it was March 14th ish because it's my dad's birthday. And that's when we got the word we're going to do the 2-week quarantine. And within 4 days, we went to a 12-week turnaround. The machines, literally the doors open, and every day we would have a line out the door of people dropping off their machines because all of a sudden everybody was at home. They were making masks. We had nurses that had never sewn anything before. They were making surgery gowns. They were making caps. They were doing everything.
So what did you do? So I never understand. This is the part of the story that makes me confused. So if I come to give you my sewing machine and I'm like, I have to make masks now, and you're like, come back in 3 months. What were they doing? Were they buying?
Oh, I was getting yelled at. I've never been yelled at so much in my life because I'm a super gentle person. Like I don't do conflict well. So I was not used to, and I understand everybody was emotional state. We were a little blindsided because we did not see this coming. But I mean,
how could you?
It was so upsetting just because we were working 12-hour days and it was 7 days a week. And because of circumstances, we were actually 100 miles away from our shop. So we were commuting 2.5 hours each way on top of it.
Oh my gosh.
And taking machines home. We had machines in our house. We had them in our shop. We had them we had them everywhere. Just
trying to get them back to people because everyone felt like when they were sewing, it was to save people's lives. And like sewing, like that's not what we do, right? We're like peripheral people that sew that people think are weirdos. Yeah. And suddenly it was like everybody was making like everybody needed them in that little time. There was just a little time that was like so stressful.
It was. And I also feel like we also had the pressure of, we always dream about what if we were forced to stay home and had no other obligations and could only sit down and sew. But what do you do when your machine's not working? And so now you're angry because you have all this time to sew.
Right. And nothing to do.
And then the other side that I feel like we dealt with, which everybody dealt with, we had Black Lives Matter going on at the same time. We had so many politics surrounding not just, everything was mask or no mask, vaccine or no vaccine. So whereas a business, you're able to kind of mostly keep your politics out of your business place, things got really weird during this time because we did require masks because it's a small space and our clientele were largely elderly, and it just felt like the right decision. But we got so much pushback.
Really?
I'm not coming to your shop if you require a mask. And we said, then don't come to our shop. I mean, it was
really we already have a 12-week wait. We don't need your business.
Yeah, we're all good here. But it was more than just, it was more of like, we don't have time. It doesn't take you much to put a mask on, whether you agree with it or not. Let's just get through this. Respect other people. So we had to navigate a lot of waters we weren't.
Wow, that's crazy. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, it was a really crazy time. Now I feel like this is like childbirth, where we've almost gotten to the point where it's a little bit desensitized and we've recovered. But there was a little bit of post trauma, I think, for a lot of sewing machine technicians. We've seen a lot of dealerships close and a lot of technicians retire indefinitely just because of the burnout rate.
Really, because of the pressure of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And they were already probably older.
Yes.
And this pushed them to be like, that's not worth it.
Yes. So all of this, it basically put a spotlight on what we already knew, which was there was already a severe shortage of service shops and capable technicians. But then COVID really showed us how bad it was.
Yeah.
And it took out still part of, I would say we probably lost, I'd say about 20% of shops. That's just my guess. I have no data
that are gone.
Yeah, I would guess about 20 more shops.
And for a variety of reasons. I mean, that's, one of our local shops in Mississippi is closing, or at least she said she's closing. She's got another big announcement coming. So we'll see what it's confusing. So yeah, I don't know, just times change. It's been hard. I mean, I know with the podcast, it was hard to keep going. It's hard to keep going.
It's
hard to keep going.
The pressure was different. You had the machine shortage for a good 6 months. You couldn't find a sewing machine under $1,000. And so that affected a lot of dealers. I even know that the dealer I was working for at the time, you'd put an order in and you would never know it would be 6 months down the road when we would get it, because factories overseas were shut down. It was just a really insane time for the entire industry, really.
And so unexpected.
Very.
An industry that was like, how are we going to survive? Now, the real question I have for all of it is, what happened once we didn't have to make masks? Did you see people going back to sewing? Like, is it still like a hot thing?
Yes. Now, I think there's always this misconception that because we don't have, I'm sure you hear this a lot. If you're in the sewing bubble, I'm convinced you wonder, what do other people do with their free time? Because if I have free time, I'm going to sew. Like, that's my number one. That's all I think about when I'm not working.
Yeah.
For other people, I'm like, what do you even do with your time? Like, who would sew?
Right.
If you're out of the bubble, you think that no one sews.
That's so funny.
People didn't even know we existed because they're like, we didn't even know sewing machines need maintenance.
Right. Do you still make sewing machines? Right.
I know, right. So I feel like we always do bring in generations of folks. It just looks different. I do think mask making brought in the next generation younger. So probably a little earlier than we would have. And we did notice right away. I mean, if you look, Craftsy did their big deal where they were doing, I think it's $1.99 for a year. And then we started to see now C&T Publishing has their Creative Spark going on.
Right.
VDTA's got the collective going on. We're starting to see the resurgence of like online learning space. So I think it's also drawing in your Gen Z and your millennials because we're speaking their language. They don't want to go sit with people in classrooms all the time.
No. And I think the older generations have gotten used to being on Zoom. So that was the sort of paradigm jump that happened, that like technology or having you even get kind of like, well, why don't we just have it on Zoom? Right. Like, I don't want to go drive there. Right. So,
saving your travel is more money for fabric, for one. Exactly. And I feel like that was what, honestly, I think the fact that we were all used to kind of meeting on Zoom was sort of the trigger point I had, that I felt confident enough that it was time to launch the virtual side, because I'm like, well, my customers, even in the academy, are still older. I'm still a 65 plus crowd. Well, now 65 and plus is on Zoom. So it's nowhere near as
it's not a problem.
Enigma up here.
Right. We got over that.
But I do think we're reaching a younger generation now, because video was what they know. They've had tablets and devices their whole life. So now maybe whereas that generation doesn't love going somewhere and sitting with strangers in a room, they're willing to use videos and learn.
Well, the thing that's so interesting, because we spent the summer, making clothing. So Sid and I, not practical at all. Her stuff looks great. Like, oh my gosh, like she's really good at it. I'm always like, well, we can just kind of, I don't know, like put a big sweater over it or something. But I was doing patterns, like going to Joann's and getting a pattern. And she was on YouTube, like, okay, I've just made my own pattern with muslin. And, it was a very different way of, it was fun to watch, sort of like, I was like, I can't do that. Right. So it's interesting to see, but like, it's amazing how many of her friends, she's in art school. So they're at art school. So that's the thing, but they're all using sewing machines. They all have sewing machines. They're a sewing generation. They're crafty generation. Which is kind of remarkable to me that they are so crafty, the Gen Z generation.
I do think that from Gen X, down to the lower generations is all very much DIY society. And a part of that, that's a big conversation about generations right now. Gen X was known for having to raise ourselves for a good part of it and be self-sufficient. So I think that carried on, and we are definitely seeing a lot more self-taught. And so that kind of played right into our the way I've designed the academy. And because we are DIY, I think that that's been my biggest driver. Is even when it comes to sewing machines, when you're DIY minded, even when you know that there's a chance you could break something, our natural inclination is like, I can figure this out. We got YouTube videos, we got all these things. So I kind of feel like that fed into my realization of how different our generations are compared to previous, where you just handed your machine off and now we want to take care of them ourselves. So
it's so interesting. I want to hear more about it. So I broke 2 machines in the space of like a week. I don't know what I did. Both of them, both the Jukis went down. But when we went to get them, because I'm taking a class, but I wasn't ready for any of that. I was just like, we're going to go get them serviced because I already messed up both of them. It costs, like, we got it serviced, but it cost us $17 to fix the problem that I had. So I was like, oh, well, okay, I think I can learn how to, you know what I mean? Like, it's interesting that sewing machines are so much, I mean, they're computers too, but I'm just saying, like, I think I'm ready for your class now, because I realized it wasn't like $400 to fix whatever I did wrong to that one machine and whatever. So I just, so tell us about the Sewing Doc Academy and how is it going and what's going on there?
This is my baby. This is the thing that has run my life in the background for a good 5 or 6 years now. And we, like I said, back when we were struggling through trying to grow, because our demand wasn't slowing any, but there was no one to hire. So we kind of muddled through this process. And I basically took all of our procedures, the exact same things that we do every day in the shop, and wrote out some course content. So we do kind of a hybrid. Everything we do is on demand. And that's because I feel like we all are crazy busy. There is no one on earth. I can count 2 people on one, that I know they're like, no, I've got time. That's it. Like, that's it. Everybody's got busy lives. We've got kids, we've got aging parents, we've got jobs, we've got all these responsibilities. So when you have downtime, you want to spend it sewing, not waiting for your machine in the shop. So we came up with, we started with we have a featherweight program that is on demand only. And that's because it's so cut and dry. If you've ever used a featherweight, I mean, they're such simplistic little machines. So we started with that as a test run, and that went pretty well. And then we started our vintage sewing machine mastery, which is full restoration, cleaning, lubricating, and minor repairs to vintage machines. Actually, the pandemic, I think, vintage machines have never gone away. They're it's not uncommon for someone who doesn't sew to find a treadle in a basement and think they've got, a $10,000 item. You don't, but they do have their value, but they're usually more sentimental than actual dollar value. But, all these people have machines sitting in their basements, Kenmores and Bernese that they've inherited. And when machines broke during the pandemic, those are the machines that came out and saved the day. Everybody, I always tell people, if you have a mechanical metal Kenmore from the 60s, you'd never get rid of the Kenmore. You never get rid of the cast iron Singer, because you're going to need it someday on, seams. The mass really, really caused some problems on modern machines. When you're doing multi-layers, people realize that, their $4,000 machine wasn't quite as heavy duty as they might have thought. So those machines in the basement came out of the woodwork.
I love that.
And so we did a lot of repair and restoration during the pandemic. So we realized the culture around vintage machines is much different than the culture in modern machines. Modern machine folks have a purpose. They sit down, they sew, they make their item. Vintage machine folks are all about the history of the machine, where it was made, when it was made, like what its history is, all of those things. So the vintage machine program, it's a hybrid of on demand, and we do live sessions. So like right now, Paul is hosting a call for our vintage people where they can ask questions. We demo things on camera. And then every month we do a live session where we go through a full restoration of machine and people ask questions live, because when you're in it live, it's a little different. So we started with those 2 programs, and we officially launched in November of 2021. And I took in 50 people in that program, which blew me away, because I have, people know me locally, but I hadn't had a name outside of Georgia really. But that made me realize the demand for bringing these machines back to life and keeping them going was huge.
Yeah.
And there's 2 programs you can travel to in the US. One's in Missouri and one's in, I want to say, North Carolina, but nobody wants to travel right now. It's expensive. You might get stranded.
Right.
Again, that's just money on the table. So we figured, this route was the way to go. And we tested